Secular is a weird word because we think we know what it means. I mean, we use it all the time, and we particularly say it with some hand-wringing. But the interesting thing is, as we talk about the secular and you have conversations with people on what the secular is, it doesn't take too long to realize that this is a very complicated word.
So what does it actually mean to live in a secular age? It's a much more complicated question than you think it is, and one that has a lot weighing on it. That if we define the secular age in the wrong way, we can actually fall into some pretty significant traps.
What we usually mean when we say secular is we tend to mean a loss of something, a loss of resources, that there's been a loss of relevance, that ultimately there's been a loss of participation. When we think about the secular, we often think that fewer and fewer people, say, are going to church, or that our classic religious institutions, like our seminaries, our colleges, our camps, that they're weaker because they have fewer resources. They have fewer ways of drawing people's attention. Now, there is no doubt that that's true. However, I'm not so sure that what it really means to live in a secular age, or to say that we live in a secular age, means that fewer and fewer people are going to church. I think what it actually means to live in a secular age is something quite different. And this is something Charles Taylor, Canadian philosopher, has written a 700-page book on. He's just trying to answer one question. And his one question he wants to answer is why, if you just rewind and go back 500 years, across the Western societies, you simply couldn't live without belief in God. You had to believe in God. It was very hard to not believe in God and live in any of the Western societies 500 years ago. But you go forward 500 years, and that's almost completely flipped. And in most places across the West, it's much easier to not believe in God than to believe in God. So what does it mean to live in a secular age? What Taylor wants to teach us is that what it really means to live in a secular age is not necessarily that fewer and fewer people are going to church. What it means to live in a secular age is that belief itself becomes contested.
I think what it means to live in a secular age means the very conditions of belief have changed. It means that belief itself, whatever belief we might hold to, becomes quite fragile, and that we find our lives inside of belief structures that are more immanent than transcendent, that we live our lives inside of an immanent frame. What I think this shows us is that there's a deep yearning for people to construct meaning, and yet this overall meaning system of a living God becomes more and more unbelievable to people. And not in a way of outright rejection, but in a way of almost, dare we even say, forgetting that God is present.
And this creates our challenge. How do we as pastors, as congregations, realize that we are as secular as the environment around us, that we too live in a world where not thinking about God, and that yet we too think we have to construct meaning? This becomes the great challenge. How does the church live here? How does the church help people hear the word of a living God speak again, and to find deep forms of meaning when there's just a surplus of it everywhere? And most of our meaning systems are quite fragile, and they break, and they're put back together and break again. This is what it means to live in a secular age.